Welcome back to the Gallagher Partnership Podcast. My name is John Neshes. I'm the Director of Partnership Marketing and Content Development here at Gallagher. And from time to time, we like to check in with members of the different organizations that we're partnered with across our portfolio. And today, I am very happy to be talking to longtime announcer from the Jacksonville Jaguars, Brian Sexton. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, John, thanks for inviting me. It's an exciting time here in North Florida with this football team. And to be honest with you, I hope you have a lot of tape because we're going to talk a lot.
Nice. So you were one of the original voices of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I learned that last year when we were doing our Tony Baselli content shoot. Describe to me the excitement around the inaugural season and being a part of it.
Well, I was 25 at the time, and I'd come on board in the fall of October of 1994, which was, about a year into the process from the time that the franchise had been awarded in November of 93 until they started playing in September of 95. So there was obviously incredible enthusiasm, as there is every summer in every NFL market, whether your team made the playoffs the year before or whether you were at the top of the draft order because you weren't very good. Hope springs eternal every year in the NFL. And for the Jaguars in 1994 and 1995, it was even greater than that because there was such anticipation for a town that had wanted a team for a long time and had tried many different avenues to get their own team to finally be looking up to it. So it was incredible to everywhere we went, everything that we did, there was interest in it. And of course, in ensuing years when the Jaguars weren't as good, that interest really faded hard. But back in the early day, it was, the honeymoon lasted, weeks and months, even years on end. And it was, for me, a young broadcaster, just a few years out of school, to be a part of a franchise that was turning on, a stadium that was being built, and a community that was becoming accustomed to being an NFL city, but it's a couple of chapters in the book someday.
Yeah, it's interesting in that I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, keep me honest here, Brian, but the Panthers and the Jags came in at the exact same time.
The Panthers were the 29th franchise. They were awarded, I think it was November 2nd. There were some issues with the Jaguars in St. Louis, and the Jaguars then won the bid in the last week of November. So they're just slightly ahead of us.
Nice. Yeah, and it was incredible in that historically franchises that are just being born don't get their training wheels off for some time. They stumble, they bumble a little bit for sometimes as long as 5-10 years. The Jaguars and the Panthers both seem to do well pretty soon after their inception. Tell me a little bit about that and the role that Tom Coughlin had in helping all that come to fruition in Jacksonville.
Well, so the Jaguars and the Panthers, and there was some controversy about this now because they were both afforded multiple picks in every round. So 2 picks in each of the 7 rounds of the draft, and they were given a full salary cap. There were some other owners who wanted to sort of handicap the Jaguars and Panthers because they thought they would come in and just start writing big checks and take all the best players off the marketplace. But both teams were able to start at the same starting line as the rest of the league and even ahead when you consider the draft picks. So that was one of the reasons why they were both in the conference championship game in their second year. Jacksonville, we played the Patriots, and in Carolina, they went to Green Bay and played Brett Favre and the Packers. So both teams in year 2 made it to within a game of the Super Bowl. I will tell you that Tom Coughlin had a plan, right? He knew coming in, even though he had never built an NFL team, he had helped build Boston College's program up. And he tells the story about his first job at the Rochester Institute of Technology outside Buffalo, where every week not only put together the game plan and the practice plan, but he washed the uniforms and striped the field and even sold tickets. I mean, at that level, the program that they hired him to build, it didn't matter that it wasn't professional. It was the same amount of work. So he brought that plan that he had added to over the years from the early 1970s to the mid-1990s and by the strength of his personality, because he is such an alpha. He is such a George Patton style leader. By the strength of his personality and his incredible work ethic, he was able to put this franchise into first gear and then start moving it in the right direction very, very quickly. We would have struggled without someone like Tom, who was so laser focused on getting the next thing done. He wasn't thinking 10, 15 days down the line. He was thinking, I've got to be right here where my feet are, and we've got to be doing these three things before we can get to the next three things. So he was to a lot of people, Johnny was a taskmaster. His hard edge wore on people, but without him and that edge, we wouldn't have gotten off the ground.
Yeah, it's funny you say that and you use the term taskmaster because, fun sidebar, after graduating from college in 1990, shout out to Keene State College, Keene, New Hampshire, I moved to Boston, and I was there when Tom Coughlin was the head coach of Boston College. And they were on TV locally all the time. I mean, in fact, I lived about a mile from campus in an area of Boston called Cleveland Circle. So in getting to know Tom Coughlin a little bit just from watching TV and seeing him in interviews and everything, he scared the hell out of me. Taskmaster is a great way of describing him, and he was very much cut out of the image of somebody back in those days who worked this whole taskmaster thing worked greatly for was Bill Parcells. And I know they worked together later, but my God, he was one intimidating guy, Tom Coughlin. And it was the Glenn Foley years, I believe. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, and that was when they defeated Notre Dame at Chestnut Hill, and it was one of the bigger wins for
Notre Dame was number one. Notre Dame was number one in the country. They had just come off one of the biggest college football games in a generation. They had beaten Florida State in South Bend. And so here comes Notre Dame number one and riding high and, the presumptive national champions. And then here comes Boston College and they knocked them off that perch. So, I was 25. So the reason that I was able to work, and I did Tom's radio and TV shows from the early days. And the reason I was able to sit chair for chair with him was because my father was the exact same way. And so it was easy for me to communicate with him. And because I could, when the Jaguars started looking for a play-by-play announcer, he was the one that said, I want him. So I have a great deal of gratitude because, the ability to communicate with somebody who valued strong communication got me my dream job at a very early age.
So you had to ask him tough questions that I'm sure pissed him off. How did that all work
out? There were times where I thought he wanted to come through the mic, and there were times where he would just go silent. I like to tell people that I could, after a loss, in the first year there were a lot of them, I could prepare 100 questions for his weekly 1-hour radio show, or I could prepare one. I just didn't know what. I mean, because you could ask one question and he would just go. I mean, he would be up on his soapbox going, and I would have to be, hey, we've got a break, I got commercials I got to work in. Or I could ask, and I would get yes, no, yes, yes, no. He had moments where, let's put it this way, I became a much better broadcaster because I had the chance to work with Tom Coughlin. And I would hope that at some point in time, and I'm sure you would say the same thing, that people that we work with say something similar about us, that in some way, shape, or form, we made them better and helped them become the best version of themselves. Tom Coughlin didn't just do that for me. He did that for hundreds of people in the Jaguars and eventually the Giants organization as well, where he challenged them to be their best and ran with them to be their best and then helped them celebrate when they were. He is a great man. And I don't use that term very often, but he is a strong family man, a strong man of faith, and a guy who represented football to the highest ideals.
So at Gallagher, we like to tout our insurance expertise within the business sectors that we serve. Expertise is a big part of who we are. How would you describe the expertise that you've brought behind the mic over the years with the Jaguars, and even in your current role as Jags senior correspondent?
Well, so I have a distinct role in broadcasting now. They changed the broadcast up with the new ownership in 2014, and I went from being the radio voice to I do the preseason telecast. I do a show we call Jags AM. I do Jags Wired. I speak a lot in the community. Since I've been here, my first day with the Jaguars was October 1st of 1994, and it probably won't surprise you that that's before a lot of the kids that work in the building today were born, right? So I like to say that I know I have an institutional knowledge of every player and every coach and every major moment, whether it was signing the first 15, right? When they were allowed to sign in the spring of 1995, street free agents, we did it over at the Landing, which is no more. They've raised it, right? To the day that we signed the first draft class, all at the same time for the first time in NFL history, to the first playoff game in 1996. I mean, it's just, I have a memory for facts and for important moments in this franchise's history. My wife tells me that I have a mind full of worthless information that I can just regurgitate upon will. And she's probably, though not necessarily being the kindest, she's probably not wrong. And the truth of the matter is that I bring a historical perspective, and I have seen everything. I have done everything in and around these buildings. And people, they don't know that they need it, but when they do, I'm the guy they come looking for. What did they do here? What about this? Who's the best player to ever wear number 4? Whatever it may be. I am able to, both in the building, right, for our internal customers, external customers, the people who listen and watch the broadcasts. And then, just this morning I was speaking at a Rotary Club and had a lot of perspective kind of questions on the games that we play in London. And because I've been to all of those, I mean, I can give that sort of perspective. So I like to think that it brings value. I'm not sure they monetize it in a way that they would say it's value, but there it is.
Well, don't we all, and all meaning like sports fans in general, if you're really a diehard sports fan and you've been following your teams and watching games or been in the industry for a long time, aren't all of our heads filled with what seems like useless knowledge until like Jeopardy comes on?
Yeah. I do say you're right, John. It's the toy department of life, right? in the department store of life, we are the toy department, and I try not to take it too seriously. I mean, it's a business, and I understand that. And people, it's their release every week. They're serious about their entertainment and their release. So I give it the work and I give it the attention that it needs, but I don't take myself too seriously, and I'm not reverent of the franchise in a way that I won't answer the tough questions. And I think I surprise people when I speak publicly when they say, "Hey, how about that Urban Meyer guy?" And I say exactly what I think and what a disaster it was. The Jaguars, if there's anything that they've really been good at, especially in the Shad Khan era, they don't let the criticism bother them. They let it roll off their backs. They're a transparent organization. They understand the entertainment side of it. They understand the information and how the information creates the bond. I think they're terrific at it, and it's made me really good at my job.
Yeah, so I love a good story of when somebody actually follows their college major into the industry that they studied. And all this talk that we're having now about you starting out in the industry as a really young man harkens me back a little bit to where you were collegiately. So you went to Kansas.
I did.
And while you were there, the Jayhawks won the NCAA basketball championship in '88. What was that like?
Well, so I was broadcasting, if you can believe it, the national championship game for the college radio station.
Wow.
As a freshman. That was my freshman year. I wasn't the only one. There were 8 of us that were involved in it. The best part about it was that there's such a tradition at Kansas. The first coach was James Naismith. And your listeners might know that he was the man who invented the game. Most wins in NCAA history. I mean, Kansas is a blue blood of a blue blood program with a long, rich tradition. And as a young broadcaster, it taught me to appreciate that. In fact, it laid the groundwork for me to chronicle the building traditions in Jacksonville. It made me so aware of moments and attuned to moments that someday I would want to be able to recall. Because all those years at Kansas, the history of the Jayhawks and the tradition of the Jayhawks, I was learning it, trying to digest it going back in history. So it really set me up for success. And Kansas has an amazing broadcast school, whether we're talking about Gary Bender or Roger Twibel or Kevin Harlan. Some of the great names in broadcasting have come through that, including Bill Curtis, the longtime newscaster at WBBM in Chicago, who then went to work at A&E. So it gave me the opportunity to learn from some of the best broadcasters, and as a sportscaster, to learn in one of the tradition-rich environments, and it really set me up for success.
Yeah, timing's everything in life, isn't it?
It is.
You're a freshman at Kansas, and the team wins the NCAA tournament. This is the Danny Manning team?
Yeah, that was Danny Manning's senior year.
Wow, unbelievable.
And then they went to the championship game in Indianapolis my senior year and got beat by Duke, that great Grant Hill, Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley team in their senior iteration. So I saw a lot of good basketball.
A little stroll down memory lane here on some of these names I'm going to drop on you here. I want to play the name game. So right. I'll drop some names and you tell me what comes to mind.
Okay.
And because you and I are from the same age demo, I'm going to be going back in time a little bit here.
I appreciate that.
I'm sure. Mark Brunell.
The lefty. They traded for him the Friday night before the draft in 1995. And they brought him in from Green Bay, and they introduced him to the media, and then they had nothing to do with him. So they said to me, why don't you take him out to dinner? So I said, I'll do better than that. I'm going to take him and get an exclusive and take him to my radio show, and then I'll take him to dinner. So my claim to fame with Mark is, and we go way, way back now, I took him to dinner on his first night in Jacksonville, covered him while he was here, did preseason football games. He was my color analyst, and had a really nice conversation with him a couple of weeks ago when we were in Detroit, where he is now the running backs coach.
Outstanding. Okay, moving on to my favorite Jaguar of all time, and you might know why when I drop his name, but Jeff Lageman.
Yeah, the former Jets first-round pick. He was my broadcast partner for 11 years. And what strikes me about him is that he jumped in with both feet to Jacksonville. He bought a house on the river. He comes from New York. And from the University of Virginia, and he settled in here and said Jacksonville is going to be a great place to play, and was willing to tell any free agent that was interested in the franchise, both while he was playing and after he left, about the virtues of Jacksonville. He saw it before a lot of other people did.
Fred Taylor.
The most gifted athlete, the most humble person that I think I have ever been around. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. He is an explosive, incredible, big play machine. Would have been the Rookie of the Year in 1998. He scored 17 touchdowns. So did Randy Moss, who won it that year. The difference was Randy scored 3 in a game on national TV on Thanksgiving Day in Dallas, and that gave him the award. And Fred learned then that playing in Jacksonville did have a disadvantage at that time because the bigger markets got the more important games. But Fred is a guy. He could score from your 1-yard line because he was 230 pounds and could bull his way into the end zone, or he could score from his because he was so fast at 230 pounds that he made fast defenses like the 99 Dolphins look silly chasing him.
Yeah, I was at the playoff game.
62-7?
No. Jets versus the Jags.
Oh, his rookie season, yeah, up in New York.
And the whole week leading up to the game, it was, if you don't stop Fred Taylor, that's the ball game.
Yep, and they did.
Yeah.
They did.
Keyshawn Johnson had a key interception at the end of that game, if you recall.
Yep.
And this one is more current. Head coach Doug Peterson.
So Doug is the big brother that this franchise needed in the worst way. We had become so jumpy. I don't know whether schizophrenic. I don't know what the right word to describe. I think jumpy's the only one that does about winning, right? And spending ridiculous money in free agency on players that didn't work. Drafting guys. Because we thought, well, maybe this, right? Maybe we can do this if we get this player. promotions and sales campaigns. And we were so desperate to win that we would do anything, which, sounds great. It sounds like a great athlete story. He would do anything to win. But too often, anything meant the wrong thing. And Doug put his arm around this franchise last year. And Trent Baalke, too. Those two have worked hand in hand. And Trent has built a tremendous roster. With this coach, I just have such admiration for the way that he has come in, been a normal human being, stops and talks, appreciates where he came from. Remember, he came into the league as an undrafted rookie behind Dan Marino with Don Shula. So talk about learning from the best. And was cut 6 times before finally hooking on. Then he went with Mike Holmgren to Green Bay and Andy Reid to Philadelphia, and then finally on his own. So he's seen it all. He's done it all. I highly recommend his book, Fearless. He's great, and we are blessed to have him. And he's the reason why this franchise is entering its golden age. He and Trevor Lawrence.
Wow, what a great way to end this podcast, Brian. Those are great words and high praise for a head coach, and my God, has he helped turn things around in Jacksonville. So, hey man, thank you so much for participating.
No problem.
And look forward to catching up with you again sometime during the season.
You bet.
Where to find me. Good luck to you and the Jags.
John,
thank you so much.
Thanks. Talking is never my problem, John. Stopping generally is.
Attaboy.